All right, everybody, welcome to this edition of the Master Implementer Interview Series. Right, so today we have a very special guest, right? Someone that I've been wanting to get for quite a bit of time, right? Got to know him for over
Yep.
the past couple of months, and his name is Benjamin Low. So, Benjamin, can you just before you come on to the interview, can you just share a little bit about yourself, your story, right, and a bit of your background for the audience out there who might not know who you are?
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you so much, Mark, for having me on your interview. I think I've seen the
Yeah.
characters as well as the personalities that you've put together on your show. They are always the who's who. So wow, there's a bit of stress on my shoulder to sort of live up to the expectations of the giants. So for those of you who have met me or don't know me, briefly what I do, I've been in the speaking, training, and coaching scene for the past 11 years. So I started out really sort of discovering myself, wanting to do a bit of things that will honor my values and honor a bit of what I feel as my giftings. So the sort of the long story short, I probably would drop the needle and the pin to my growing up years. I grew up as a serial bully victim. So from 7 to 17 years old, I was in two boys' school in Singapore. I won't name the schools, obviously. I had my fair share of like a traumatic bullying experience, verbal bullying, physical bullying. So I grew up really being someone of very inferiority complex, low self-esteem, and you'll never imagine like someone given this kind of like growing up years as well as this journey experience to do what I do today. So that was like how I would see myself growing up in my 20s. I went through a life coaching program when I was about 18 to 19 years old, and I would say that was my turning point when I started to realize that hey, I actually do have an affinity in terms of working with people. And that showed through, for example, when I was going through a coaching program and we were training to be coaches. Sometimes I would have people walk away with certain remarks and comments and say, hey, Ben, like I like whatever I just shared with you, I don't even dare to share with like my mom, my dad, or
Wow.
like I feel very safe to speak with you. So the abridged version of that was when I was studying accountancy at SMU. I realized that one, I had affinity with people, but interestingly, I don't have any affinity with numbers.
My numbers.
So
Yeah.
the funny thing was when I was doing like what modules, I even forgot what modules I was doing. Like for example, we're supposed to balance the cash flow
Balance
statements,
sheet.
right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
balance sheet, cash flow. My person to the left, right, they seem to do everything. They tie everything down to the 10 cents, the 20 cents. I would always have the missing 10 cents, $5, $1, and I was wondering, like, hey, am I a retard or something? Like why is it like all of us went into accounting school, but I so jialat, like I cannot get the numbers right. So I think that's sometimes life's way of telling you what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. I really believe that like again, it's one thing to stay the path, but
Yep.
it's also quite the other to sort of like take the path, the signals that's coming through in your path, and to realize, like whether there's a match, whether there's a resonance.
Yep.
And during those 4 years, I started to realize since I cannot do well in accounting, since I'm not a numbers guy, why don't I just explore the big world out there? So that planted the seeds of my whole coaching, speaking, and training career. I started out doing a lot of like workshops. I started to train corporate clients in public speaking, presentation skills. So the jump to the forward version, 11 years later, what I do is basically I service blue chip MNC clients, and I help corporate leaders to take themselves from being nervous, okay, to be confident, authentic, and effective
Yep.
on stage. So I've been engaged by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, UOB Bank, and even by the Japanese government, where they fly me in. It's one of my sweetest
Wow.
gigs so far. They fly me to Tokyo once a year for the past 3 years, whereby I was
Wow.
coaching Japanese fintech founders to come to Singapore to pitch their business.
Wow.
Aside from that, the professional speaking business, right? So the coaching is where I help people to do well on stage. While I take off the coaching hat, I put on the speaking hat and realize both of us
Yep.
have hats today and caps today. Yeah, the speaking hat is also a very interesting and dynamic one. I get to speak across 9 countries in Asia, and I service a life insurance giant. And the kind of relationship allows me to really help the life insurance agents to use social media strategies to engage millennials like us, right? How do we
Yep.
bring millennials into the life insurance business? So broadly speaking, this is what I do, the speech and presentation coaching, the sort of like regional speaking work. And as of this
Yep.
year, I've been very fortunate to be accorded the Certified Speaking Professional. It's called CSP for short. And what the CSP does is really is accorded the top 12% of professional speakers globally. I am the youngest in the whole of Asia.
Yep.
And I think very thankful because with the support of mentors, have to go through the battery of tests. You have to submit a full-length speech, your P&L statements. You have to have like threshold income of 400,000 for
Wow.
all the angmos in the world to determine that you're a great speaker, and then you get the
Yeah.
credential. So that's really the lowdown of who I am in about 2 to 3 minutes. I guess, I hope.
Wow. Yeah, no, those are some really like awesome achievements, right? So I definitely have a lot of questions to ask based on your story. So
Please do.
I guess the first one is from your shift, right, from the
Yeah.
accountancy school,
Yeah.
right, and then moving to speaker, right? Could I just check, like, as in, I knew that definitely like you probably didn't resonate with whatever they taught in accounting and stuff, but how was the decision? Like, was it a very simple, easy decision for you to move from accountancy to the business, the world, the speaking world, right? Or do you actually have to take some steps to move towards it? Like, for example, with your parents, with your family, like what did your friends say?
Yeah. So definitely, I would say easy will be the last word, right? It was like hell of a sort of a difficult situation and sort of like decision as well. So I think for most of us, we've been raised by Asian and Singaporean parents, right? So again, my mom didn't really plant the dream. I gong gong, I stupid, right? During like NS, I was like reading books on like a Fortune magazine, and then I say like, oh, investment bankers make 5-figure salary upon graduation. So I wanted to study accounting and then finance, right? So and I just chose accounting because easier. Anyway, the long answer short was that it wasn't easy because I tried my best, my level best to get out of accounting school because, you know, at that time, the literature about like, wow, dropping out of university, be a Steve Jobs, a Mark Zuckerberg was all the rage.
All the rage.
All the rage. And what I did was I literally cold called the president of my university. And okay, long story short, before I cold called, I wanted to apply out, right? So it was a bit of like a catch-22 situation. You have to do well in your course, then you can change out. But my reasoning is that, you know, if I can do well, means I think it should be quite easy. Then why change, right? So I couldn't do well. My GPA was terrible. So I was very upset with the administration. I cold called the president of the university and I said, sir, this is not how you should run your university. And that totally burned the bridges because I realized I like in military terms, right? You jump the chain of command. So there's like the vice dean, the dean, the chancellor, blah, blah, blah. I jumped basically 4 important persons. And then they're all like sending me email and say, hey, young man, this is not how you should do it. So anyway, that was the school part. The parents part, I think my parents certainly didn't want me to like at least not graduate. So my commitment to them is at least I'll give you that in Hokkien terms, that pang sai zua, right? That piece of paper to say I've done it. At least, you know, I paid my dues and then, you know, I'm free to go. But I think the biggest kind of like a challenge would really be, you know, as a speaker and trainer, like and for Mark as well, you do it really, really well, is to find your positioning in this like crowded and noisy world. And I think for me, that was the thing that I think it was the hardest to start with. I mean, now as we are speaking in 2020, we see so many younger speakers and trainers coming in, right? Now, first, rewind that 10 years ago, I like to say, you know, in Singapore, in Asia, I probably had a handful, less than 10 people who are of like 20s wanting to speak and train. Now, 10 years later, now it is almost like a prevalent thing. So it's like, again, finding good role models, finding my identity, finding my market gravity, finding my voice and all of that kind of things.
Yeah, as in, definitely, like, I think positioning right now is extremely important, especially as more speakers and all come into the space, right? So what would your what would your like quick like 1 to 2 top tips, right, for people who are actually trying to get into the whole speaking game, right, the whole coaching game, right? That what are 1 or 2 like specific tips you actually advise them, right, if they really want to get started out, or at least, right, for people who might be a bit afraid, I think a bit contextualized to your story, like they're a bit afraid of whether they should go to the space, like what would be your 1 or 2 top tips for this group of people?
Okay, so I'm going to say something that may not be very palatable to most people. But I want to say, like, okay, so first and foremost, a few premise, right? So in the world where I operate in, we call ourselves professional speakers. Not that we are very professional. We speak with Queen's English, you know, we are impeccable of some sorts, right? But I think from where I was being brought up in terms of the speaking world, we call ourselves a professional speaker when someone pays you to speak. Right, so spirit is very clear cut. So you can be as theatrical as you can, but if nobody pays you $1 to speak, you're not a professional speaker. But you can be as boring as hell, but somehow there's value to be had, and people pay you like, you know, like a good 4, 5, 6 figures to speak. You are a professional speaker. So I think given this kind of premise, right, if any first few quick tips would be 1, know the audience that you want to serve. So in the markets of like professional speaking, there's the B2C as well as the B2B market. So if you're a B2C, like business to consumer kind of market, chances are you're going to serve like individual people who have the money and spending power to make their own decisions, right? There is pros and cons to both the markets, which I will not go into quite so deeply. But, you know, if you're going to B2B, which is what I'm doing, I serve corporations. So meeting and knowing like sort of like a prospecting corporations is a very different ball game altogether.
Yeah.
So like for example, if I sort of meet a prospective client from UOB, there is a procurement process. So you're literally being judged by, the kind of value, and you need to size them up. It's like a how should I say? It's a multi-level dating game. You're going to be dating with a lot of different stakeholders, and you need to really understand, what kind of language they're saying, what are their challenges, what are the later needs. Whereas the B2C is a different game altogether, which you see, like, for example, the mass market trainers who are teaching you anything from wealth, investing, relationships, down to people like, I know of a sleeping coach. A sleeping coach for babies. Yeah, they teach parents on how to maintain a sleep rhythm for babies as well, right? So there's value to be had. So question number one, who is the audience you're trying to serve? Because in each and different track, right, there's different kind of nuances, dynamics, as well as rhythm of the game to master, right? I think the second thing would be for you to be, again, professional, you have to be paid. But for you to be paid, there needs to be, again, value, right? So what is the value that is to be had through your speech? So you got to ask yourself, can you crystallize whatever you're saying into value? And this value, it is ideally actionable, practicable, and implementable, right? So actionable is like, can we take it forward? Actionable, practical, is it like, you just talk every concept, very concept, and there's a lot of speakers and trainers like that. They talk, like the 5-step system, the 5P, the 4C, the 6 A's. It's like almost like, like Wuling Meiji, like martial pugilistic meat, right? But when you ask them, so okay, what should I do next? Then talk, right? So you need to be clear, like, is it like practical? And then, like, for example, implementable. I think implementable to look at your master implementer, right? You are the seafood here, right? So I think implementation is really, can you put it down into a clear, actionable plan that has, like, again, the SMART principles, like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound, right? So again, like, that's the second part. So again, know your audience, try to crystallize the value. And then the third part, I think, for starters would be, again, know where you can place and fit yourself in that crowded space that you want to walk into. Find the gaps whereby you can go into. So anyway, long answer short, I realized when I started speaking, like again on big stages about 5 to 6 years ago, there weren't many Asian people speaking about millennial topics. There were a lot of Ang Mohs talking about, like, for example, next generation, millennials, blah, blah, blah. But at least the whole Asia, handful, like probably less than 5. So I realized that, hey, that seems to be a opportunity. So I basically worked my way up there from that kind of like awareness.
Yeah, well, I love it, right? I love that, because what happens, I think a lot of speakers, right, when they first want to go into the space, right, they always just think about what they want to say, right? But I think you came from that approach, was like, who do I want to serve, right? What is the kind of value I can give them, right? And then you serve from that, right? Instead of just like, I want to be a speaker, let me just share what I want to do. So I love those things. So thanks for sharing. So I'll move on a bit to what you shared about. Because just I know you shared about how you actually kind of like jumped the gun, right? You were talking to the president, right? And thanks for being so open. But I think most people, when I hear, right, especially in this space, right, when they ask someone who is totally at the top, right, usually the ending can be pretty well, right? But for us, like there was a bit of the other guys kind of told you, hey, you better not do it and stuff. But I love that spirit where you decided just to not to ask for permission, but just went straight to it, right? So with that in mind, right, I was just wondering, was that the attitude you took towards when you were finding your mentors, right? When looking for people to potentially mentor or coach you down the road? Because I feel that there's a limiting belief that I feel that a lot of people in the millennials, the audience has, right, in terms of like asking people for help or support or some form of mentorship. Is that something that you see as well?
I think if there's anything that has like taken place on me, I think age has mellowed me quite a bit. Don't get me wrong. I think I still like to think I still have that kind of fire within me. Like if I want something, I'll just like go straight to the top. And I see that. Okay, so one context, right? In Asia, we are not conditioned to seek or approach authority. So if you see, like, for example, someone who's very well esteemed, like a CEO or founder, or anyone whom we feel that is of high regard and we want to learn from or nurture a relationship, naturally, there's a bit of deferentialness that's coming on, right? Like for example, we need to respect authority. We shouldn't like be too charmy of them. And that happens, in the kind of like corporate setting where I'm working with corporate clients as well. So that's the context. So how I'll unpack this in terms of, like, for example, how to approach authority. I think a few things, right? Now, as I become, again, more of like someone doing this business for 10 years, I become in the mentor role, but I am still seeking, I'm a mentee seeking a lot of mentorship from a lot of great people. I think if anything, like the component which you just talked about, right? What I like to call it as a chutzpah, right? So chutzpah is spelled as CHUTZ PAH. So chutzpah is really that kind of attitude, which is like a daring, and audacity, right? So you
Yeah.
if you want something, you go ask for it. And I think to a certain level, mentors like that, right? Because who like at their level, time is a scarce commodity,
Yeah.
right? So they're not going to like say, oh, I wait for you to slowly decide, like, okay, you want me to help you or not? You don't want to help me, no, right? So when you go there, you need to be crystal clear. You need to be, like sort of like valuing his time, valuing your time, and be able to propose, right? So the proposition underneath it is an attitude of, like, for example, you are worth it, and you are worth it of their time, and you want to learn so much from them. So that the attitude is important. I think on top of that, for millennials seeking mentorship from the mentors, I think the dynamics have also changed. So I think as add on to that, you should also ask yourself again, back to the value key equation, right? Like, could you do something for them and with them first? Because I think you need to rise into their ballpark. You need to realize that they at their level, a lot of people are courting them, right? So just the asking is just one part of it. Asking will not get you into the door, right? Asking only gets you to the doorknob, right? But if you want to turn the doorknob and go in and be in the same room with them, then you got to ask yourself metaphorically, what does the turning the doorknob and moving inside the room, or being able to be invited in the room, what does it take? Right? Because ultimately you want mentorship, and mentorship, to put it simply, they are opening up their mind, their resource, their network to you and for you. Who's benefiting? You, right? So again, you got to ask yourself, and I think this is something that maybe is like not so prevalent in Singapore, right? Because I realize a lot of the young people in Singapore, again, don't mind me ranting, I'm a young person as well. Sometimes we are not so trained to look at it from the other person's perspective. So that's what I realized. Like, you need to think from that person's perspective, and then ask yourself how you can construct value for them, so that you can be in the same level with them, at least relationship wise, so that they feel they want to support you in return. So for me, at least my MO these days when I seek mentorship is always to come in from the position of how can I support, how can I contribute. So in my program, sometimes I would say, like, for example, can you sort of volunteer your time? Right. So like if you have anything that you can help them with, like, for example, if you know photography, can you volunteer as a photographer for the event? Right. Can you help to open your network as well? So sometimes, don't neglect, you may be young, but you may know great people as well. So like, for example, I know Mark, and maybe Mark can be of help to a certain person. Let me do a marriage and introduction, but make it sure it's like a double opt-in. So you let people know before you introduce.
Wow.
Right? The third thing would be like volunteer your time, your skills, volunteer your expertise as well. Right. So expertise and skills are different. Skills is just the doing, but sometimes expertise and insights. Like sometimes I will sit down with mentors and I'll share with them like social media trends, which is what I spend lots of time doing, understanding, and they just want to say, hey, like, how does this work? Right. So it's a bit of that. I think is volunteer your perspectives, right? So expertise and perspectives. I think perspectives is like, for example, you help them with their scope of work and give them, like, for example, your bird's eye view, your perspectives of what is this whole topic about. So again, once you do that, you're planting seeds. And I think the analogy is really like a relationship bank account. If you want to withdraw things out, right, you got to tompang and put money in first. So you got to ask yourself, like, what is that currency that this specific person is looking out for? Each and every mentor will have a different speaking language and different kind of currency of value to them. So I think that's where the people dynamics is something that's under educated in schools and undershared in schools as well.
Wow, I absolutely love that, because I think, like, as much as, yes, some people are saying ask, right, don't ask for permission, go for it, but yours is like a much more strategic and a bit with very good tactics on how to actually make sure that the increase the likelihood of the mentor or the somebody else they're trying to reach out to actually says yes. And how you do it is actually you give value first, you contribute whatever we can, instead of just asking about me, right? So I absolutely love that the attitude and the kind of tips that you do, right? Expertise, skills, and networks, right? I think that were really, really useful. So right, so we talk a little bit about, like, how would you position yourself? How do you stand out? How do you actually get people to notice you, right? So I don't go a bit into, like, how you actually over the years, right, since you start out your speaking career, right, getting out to all these engagements, how do you actually hone your craft? Right, because I think speaking is something that a lot of people might want to do, but some people can do pretty well, some people can do, right? And you are one of the youngest CSP in Asia. So can you just share a little bit about how was your approach of constantly trying to improve in, let's say, your speaking skills, honing your craft, right, to be absolutely at the best quality you could, in terms of maybe your routines, your strategy, your mindsets, or even like some of the biggest lessons you might have learned from your mentors or people who have taught you previously?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things is I always ground myself. So to put this like a very simple kind of like how should I say this? So in the military, in national service, right, I used to serve in the Air Force. Right? It's the ground force of the Air Force unit, and we sort of run this huge air missile system. right?
Yeah.
But every time we know, like for example, when we set up this whole machine and this whole like wall machine, right? There's what we call as a grounding cable. So what a grounding cable does is like, for example, lightning, right? This whole machine is made of metal, right? So when a metal lightning, huge disaster for any human man that's touching, right? So a grounding cable basically grounds it and basically sets away all that, all the forces so that you will not like touch and get electrocuted. And I think, that was like a metaphor that I took away, very, very simple one, very innocuous one, but I think in the work I do, I think again, like as you become better as a speaker, I think one of the best ways to know whether you're getting better as a speaker is from that one speech, do you have a spin-off? Are you getting invited to speak more, do more, paid more, right? If yes, you're on the right track. So I think to answer your question squarely, there's a few things, right? So one, I like to ground myself and I never want to be the most successful person in the room, right? So this is probably like often said enough, but I think for me is, I actually like to be young, right? A lot of people do not realize that the value of being young. Right? A lot of people say like, wasn't it stressful for you, like a young person, and then you see all your contemporaries, and mind you, my mentors or the speakers in the circuit I play, they get paid anywhere between 20 to 25,000, 30,000 per gig, per speech. And then, when I was looking at them, I was like, wow. But and starting out young people say, you're young, no experience, no experience, no money, no network, no education, no credibility, right? I say, like instead of focusing on all the things that you don't have, why don't you focus on what you have? Right? And I realized that people do not appreciate this whole word called youth, right? I think what youth gives us, or that whole youngness or being at the 20s and early 30s gives you a lot of things, right? One, it gives you a longer runway to your success. So like, for example, I would imagine that, again, the reason why I am sort of like doing the work I do is I started early, right? But people say, hey, you're so young, how do you do it? I say, I did it when I was 20 years old while everyone was studying accounting. Remember, they cannot balance their balance sheet and cash flow statements. I was doing it already, right? I think youth also gives you that license to make mistakes and not be critically judged for that, right? But do not abuse that, right? So one is like, I realized that, hey, people are more sort of like forthcoming as well as forgiving as well. Yeah. And then I think youth also gives you that license to ask and seek mentorship, right? So you can imagine, like now I have people who are like 40s and 50s seeking mentorship. It takes a certain ego and humility to ask someone who's younger. It's not always the case, but sometimes they have this, right? But from a younger person, I don't have, like in Chinese, I 没有面子的问题 I can literally, like, I don't have, like, I can go straight to this speaker and say, hey, I just started out, look at me, I'm 20s. And I use that like during my whole of my 20s, irrespective of how more successful I was getting. So that's really my sort of a quick grounding. Find yourself with great people to model, and then I think the third thing would be really find out each and every. I would say each and every business has its game rules, right? So for example, in the speaking business, I am in a speaking association, and we operate with this 4 E's of speaking. The first E is eloquence. So again, if you want to speak in Singapore markets, right, chances are you can get away with Singlish. But if you want to go out of Singapore and then you want to be comprehended, you want to work with the Angmos, right? You got to clean up your language. And it's not that you cannot use Singlish, right? You can drop a few Singlish, you can be colloquial sometimes, but you still need to be like, understood, and you have to maybe code switch a little, right? So the eloquence is really a few things like, do you sound well on stage? Can you work a crowd? Can you do storytelling? All about the delivery. I think the second part is enterprise. Which is learning how to market and sell your business, how to build a brand, blah, 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 right? So eloquent, enterprise. The third one is expertise, right? So expertise is knowing what's the niche, what's the lane that you're going to run deeply and run continually on. Because again, as with all businesses reward longevity. They do not reward, like, for example, fickleness. So if you want to do a baking business, like, you do 1 month, and then you're going to take care of like hamsters, and then you're going to jaga cats, right? It's going to be like, like to the market, who is Ben? Like, you see a cat guy, who are you, right? So the expertise comes from longevity, sustenance, and consistency, doing the same thing over and over again. And I think the last thing is the ethics of the speaking business. A lot of people do not realize this, but I'm very sometimes paiseh and shameful to say, in the speaking business, there are people and speakers who are not doing it all right all the time. So for example, they try to game the game, right? So in the, like, for example, like to again, like in internal sharing, Amazon best-selling author, right? You can actually get an Amazon best-selling author by getting a remote category in a remote time window, right? So for example, you launch a book on Amazon, But if you're selling a remote category, you choose the category and you put it like, for example, a certain time window, and then you have all your friends to buy the book at one time.
Yeah.
And then you become number one. You take a screenshot, right? So there are speakers like that who say, hey, I'm an Amazon best-selling author, right? And then there's people who get their degrees from degree mails as well, right? So broadly speaking, I think, the fundamentals, I'm a bit old school and traditional, right? So, but the fundamentals are what guides you to be lasting in the business, you see, right? So if you don't have these 4 E's, missing one of these 4 E's, you cannot fly, right? So I always work on my eloquence. So like every year I spend money to enroll to be better at my craft. So this year I am engaging a storytelling coach from the US. I pay him good money, and then he's coaching me, review my speeches, and then improve on that. Right. In terms of the enterprise part, knowing how to work the business, the marketing, the sales, I also have coaches on that. In terms of the expertise components, R&D. Right. So you also need to do R&D on your topic. Right. Better still, if you're reading other people's book, when is the time you want to write your own book? Right. Because the root word of authority is the author. Right. So when you start to create your own content, it becomes like uniquely you. And then the last part is about ethics. It's also a reminder like, hey, am I doing things right or not? So I think there's always like the rules of the game. And I think that being a professional speaker, you have to like really do well and excel on these 4 E's.
Yeah, I love it. So I think what you shared about like the Amazon and stuff, I think it's what the industry right now calls it as hacks, right? Hacks to hack the game to get positions out more, right? But your focus is really on what I call longevity, right? How you can create things, like how you can work on things that can bring you down 5, 10, 20 years down the road, right? And that's something I love, right? I think bring the foundation right instead of trying to jump to spaces where you might not really have the expertise or the skill sets to be there yet, right? And I think that helps you for the long run. So I absolutely love it.
Yeah. So Mark, I think
yeah.
I want to say something like, I think hacks are important, right? So like for me, I mean, who doesn't love to take shortcuts, right? I mean, I would love to take shortcuts, but I think again is to weigh the potential repercussions of taking a shortcut. So there's certain shortcuts that I will take. So like, for example, hiring a coach is a hack, right? Because like if I'm hiring a great coach and he can tell me like how to go from A to Z in the most expedient, the straight line fashion, versus me taking all the stupid mistakes, ding ding dong dong, ding ding dong dong. That's a hack, right? I also like, for example, invest in relationships. That's a great hack. So for example, if I want to do more speaking engagements in, for example, Hong Kong, it's stupid for me to go to LinkedIn and then try to go it cold versus like try to establish strategic partnerships 3 to 6 months before, which is what I do. Every time I'm going to speak, like for example, last year I was speaking in Indonesia, a crowd of 6,000 people. And then 6 months before that, I was already using LinkedIn to nurture good relationships with good people first. And then I say, hey, and I'm over in Jakarta, could we just catch up over coffee? So again, there are again certain hacks that are virtuous, but there's certain hacks that are career damaging. So certain things that you
exposed,
especially with the speaker and the social media these days, and especially if you're serving the B2C, right? You want to realize that one misstep with the whole social media and internet, right? Your digital footprint is always there. So you want to ask yourself, would you want to be associated with that guy who tried to become an Amazon best-selling author but tried to game the system and failed terribly, right? So again, that's where we probably have to wait properly.
Yeah, I love it. So thanks for sharing. I think the distinction between, yes, there are hacks, but there are some hacks that are a bit more virtuous, like you're sharing, and some hacks that actually might not be as beneficial to your career, especially if like exposed or found out, right? So moving on to something a bit more implementable, actionable, right?
Sure.
Could you share a little bit about like what is your, like for example, when you go for speech, right? What's your level of preparation for it, right? What's your level of preparation and how like how much time do you put in? I think just to give some people a kind of a view, right, of how much work is needed, right, before you prepare a speech, right? Is it just simple, just talking on the spot? Like, just share a bit, if you could, about your preparation process.
I actually try to time that before. So at least for my corporate presentations, like the live ones, right, inclusive of preparation, arrival. Like for example, when I'm working like a bigger crowd in pre-COVID days, usually my time for preparation is about 10 to 15x. So for example, if I'm speaking for 1 hour in Malaysia, KL, right, the total time that I elapse totally or in sort of inclusive of preparation, script writing, coming up with right exercises, right activities, preparing the deck of slides, down to going down to actual venue, especially if you're live crowds, right? You want to know like again, I made so many mistakes, which is great, right? Because I was the one speaking in Hong Kong, and then I was gay kiang like you try to skip steps. Skipping steps sometimes will kill you. I was speaking to a live crowd about 2,000 people, and then for some reason or the other, I didn't push hard enough to stand on the stage for a rehearsal. And then what happened was that when I was delivering the presentation, right, the spot that I was at, the spotlight was so hot and was like making me sweat, and the sweat was going into my tears, into my eyes. It was so bad that a Filipino delegate from the front took a tissue and ran up to me and gave it to me. And I
Oh,
always
wow.
remember, right, like wow, that was a touching scene, like, for sure, right?
Yeah,
At least your audience cares for you, right? But that was also like wow, like that was in Chinese a bit lang pei, right? Or in English it was like a bit like, slightly humiliating. Like there are certain kind of like a scenario situations you shouldn't go into. But to answer your question, there's a few phases. One is the client design and alignment. You need to know that you serve your client, so you need to know like who are you serving. So B2C, B2B, like you need to craft a good content and a whole delivery that delivers. I think the second is the actual speech or presentation craft. So a lot of people do it differently. For me, some people like do storyboard. For me, I do a lot of visualization. So like, for example, when I am going to the gym, I visualize how I open. What's the first thing I would say? Would I sound funny? I'll say a story and then I'll stop at the story, I visualize. So I spend a lot of time visualizing. And then the third is the iteration of the speech and presentation. True, sometimes you get more inspiration, you add on, you improve, you enhance. I think the four is the rehearsal. So the mock delivery, being clear of event, space, venue, lights, everything. And then 5 is the big show. So usually if I do all 5, right, the actual time is just 1 hour. It's about 10 to 15 times inclusive of the end-to-end all preparation that's required.
Wow, I love it. So I think that really goes to show, right? Because I have been interviewing a few like the big speakers around it, and I realized that there's 2 groups of speakers, right? One is the group like yours, right? A lot of very meticulous, a lot of big preparation, right? And then there's another group that typically I realize that they try to wing it, right? Or they just try to use whatever they can share on the spot. Obviously, both there has its merits and stuff, right? But I think in terms of you want to get to that level, right? In terms of the top 1-2%, right? You need to have that level of preparation if you want to deliver some form of a quality presentation, right? So thanks so much for sharing from that perspective. Yeah. So I want to go back just a little bit before I move on to the next segment, right? Because I thought that was something very interesting. So you said that you started when you were 20, right? Your speaking career, right? And so can you just share a little bit, maybe some 1 or 2 stories if you could, right? Like how did you get started into the space, right? Were you like just giving talks for free, right? Did you immediately get gigs like in just 6 months of starting? Like, can you just share a little bit of how you got started and how maybe the momentum kind of drove, especially when you're starting out in your 20s?
Yeah. So I think as a precursor back, okay, so I sort of draw back. So I love how you say like there are speakers who wing it and there are speakers who are like meticulously prepared, right? I like to think that there usually will be a middle ground, right? And I don't know which mentor told me that this, like, in the actual spaces or in the real world, we sometimes do not fall to the level of our competence, but we fall to the level of our preparation.
Awesome.
Right. So there's the layers to unpack. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm good, right? So like whatever spaces I will be good. Right. But I think sometimes, you actually fall to the level of preparation, whether your preparation is higher, your competence or lower, that's the questionable part. But what preparation is really is really like, there's a lot of things about a speaker or a speaking process that a lot of people discount. Right? It's not just the speech in itself, but there's also the mental game, the emotional game, the spiritual game, the physical game as well. So each and everything has a part to make sure or make or break you on stage. So as simple as, I've been times I've spoken on stages whereby sometimes already out of sheer forgetfulness or lack of professionalism, they don't prepare a bottle of water. Right? Try speaking on a big stage without a bottle of water for at least 1 hour. Your throat will run dry. And you know that you will not function. And you'll be struggling. Your vocal cords will start to get very hoarse. Right? And again, who can you blame? Right? I mean, again, you point to the fingers pointing, you say, oh, organizers never do their work, and then you never ask, right? But that's preparation, right? So you can be as good, you can be really competent as a speaker, but physically, preparation, you are not like sort of having a tick in a checkbox. Again, you are judged, you're as good as the last speech you've delivered on stage. Right, so you could be very good past, but the last speech people watch you, oh, he's just not really that good. Like I don't even know what the hell is he saying. Like he didn't seem to like carry much energy. So you could be like so amazing, glorious years, but the last one speech could be that one that you cannot redeem. So I like to think again, there's a space for winging it. Again, the preparation allows. In fact, it's with the preparation then you can wing it. Yeah, it's like with the preparation that's being done, then you can flow along the space. So I think people who actually wing it is like they would have some systems already in play, and it's like some margin of error, and then they go in and then they flow with that. So back to your question, the part about how I get started, is it? I think so, right?
Like when you're
I always
20, like when you're new, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think my first paid gig, which I wrote in a blog, was when I was doing a exchange in Korea. So I was like doing a university exchange. At that time, I was like doing a lot of like volunteering gigs. So I was like a president of a youth health organization, a health promotion board. So I was like basically training people because I had a fervent passion for public
Yeah.
speaking. I was in Toastmasters.
Yeah.
I won a couple of awards, like represented Singapore to compete against a few other countries. Receive a few trophies as well. And then there was one time whereby I received a long distance email from Korea in Seoul, and then to my sort of like organizers in health promotion board, and say, hey Ben, can you just run this 1 day training for our volunteers? And then I say, okay, Ken. And then like I believe it was a chat message, and they say, oh, like how much do you charge? That was my first paid excitement, right? So and then I didn't know better. Then I say, like how much budget do you have? And then they say, oh, $50. And I said, okay, I'll take it. Yeah, so that was actually my first paid assignment. But then the funny thing was that I realized, I had to buy like workshop preparation, that logistics. I give some sweets because back then I was training youth market, and then to and fro taxi, right? So actually I wrote in a blog whereby if I add all the expenses, I was actually out of pocket. I was actually negative like $7 or $8. But you see, I think again, sometimes the first paid gig will come in a very, I mean, again, if you're already more established level, you'll get a full first paid gig. But I get my first paid gig at 20 years old, really because of volunteering. And that was like quite a defining moment, because when people start, I'd like to think when people ask you like, Mark, how much do you charge? Is they place a value on your work and your time already. It's like a recognition. It's like a milestone. So for me, like insofar I didn't make like positive returns on that event, I realized that, hey, at least like people start to see the value that I give, and that gave me the mini confidence. So I think as a sort of like a bridge version or as a condensed version, a lot of speakers ask me, like, for example, how do you get like paid 5 figures for a speech? And I say, learn to get paid 2-3 figures first. Right. There is a starting point. You need to embrace this ground with humility. A lot of like I think again that's the condition of a lot of the younger speakers. Again, as if I'm not young enough, right? The younger speakers always want to go for the moonshot. I think the moonshot is important, but again, there's certain sort of like tempo and momentum. So there's nothing wrong, there's nothing humiliating with starting out with a two. Like my first gig was a 2-figure, $50, right? The 2, 3, 4 figures is for you to make mistakes, to test out your content, to make sure that it works, to also give you that margin of experimentation and discovery. Like if you don't even know yourself, how are you going to like perform on a 5-figure gig, right? And do you really want to bomb yourself for your first gig and be remembered by a lot of like event organizers as the guy who get the first and only 5-figure gig? Right. So that's the thing, right? So I think feel the ground, start small, and then you slowly will find your way up.
Wow, I think super inspiring, right? Because like if people are thinking like, oh, once I go to speaking career, hopefully in a while's time I can get like my 5-digit, 6-digit speaking. But hey,
it can be done.
Can be done for $50.
Yeah.
I think my first gig, right, was me asking, right? But I was like, how much do you want? Right. So it was I think it was doing some form of investing one. I think it was like $5 each, right?
Yeah.
So it all started really
exactly
small,
right. You at $5, I got $50. Like we almost like like 10x 30, like in the same realm.
We move up. Yes. So I think that's a really inspiring. I think just a good reminder for people who are starting out in the space, who might be not progressing the way they want. There's all starts small and then it goes up, right? So I'm going to move on, right, to more of your coaching space right now, because I know you coach a lot of even like high potential guy I have seen through your Instagram, which is actually really entertaining education at the same time, right? But can you share a little bit, right, in terms of your coaches or the people you have been teaching or helping, right? What are some of the traits or characteristics, right, of some of your students or mentees who actually achieve way faster, way better, way bigger results, right, than those who might actually not be at the area of life they would like, or they're actually a bit slower, or just maybe a bit stuck, right? What do you think in terms of your personal observations of some of the traits or characteristics that the students that in the faster group might have?
Yeah. So what I noticed about like again, so there's a lot that goes into like, for example, coach and client selection, right? So they while I'm choosing them, they're also choosing me, right? So I can't say, I can't say, and I wouldn't say on behalf of why they chose me, but I definitely can say why I chose them and why they continually thrive, right? So like to give you a context, like for example, the coaching I do is like professional side as well as what I coach in the life insurance side. So on the life insurance side, I typically coach like, for example, the number ones. So like, for example, I work with a life insurance giant. I coach the number 1 director in the whole of Singapore, and her business of her agency, if she moves out of that whole company, will totally like have have earthquake shake on the kind of company. There's another consultant that I coach, she is a life insurance consultant now, but before that, she was a HR director drawing $250,000 in terms of like corporate person, then coming in to be a life insurance consultant.
Wow.
So all the likes are the other number one in the space, living top positions. I think there's certain traits. And I also like to think I also embody certain traits. And I think, again, you start to realize that you are going to be like your coach, and your coach is also going to be like your students. Because again, again, there's a very deep metaphorical or philosophical kind of thing, right? We are always trying to help our past selves, right? I think it takes a bit of time to sink in, but I read it in a book somewhere. It's like, as a coach, you are sometimes trying to help your past self, right? So consider this for a while, right? As a coach, you are already accelerated to a certain level, and hence you are able to help people, right? But the people who are attracted to you, chances are they see themselves in the past Mark and the past Ben. So as a coach, right, you are not meant to serve everyone and anyone. But obviously, you are best served to serve people who resonate with you, whether in terms of vibration, energy, tempo, experience, whatsoever, right? So I like to see that, a lot of my coaches are like me, and sometimes I also learn from my coaches. But anyway, to your question, a few things. Like, one is the ability to zero themselves, right? So what does zero themselves mean is, like, in Chinese, I do a bit of fair amount of speaking in Mandarin as well. It's called 归零状态. Right, so what is 归零状态 is really like, for example, if you have an amazing day, like you close a big deal, 5-figure, 6-figure deal, right? Yesterday, today, back to zero. Okay, let's go back to the sheet. Let's go back to our drawing board. What's next? Conversely, if you have a shitty day, you have like three appointments, all fly your kite, all say no to you, no worries. Like, let's start today, zero, and then you start your day, you plan your day. Let's go back to the drill. So I realized this ability to zero themselves is a skill as well as a honing in progress. A lot of the top producers that I work to, right, they never get too conceited with success, and they never get too discouraged by failures. And what they have to do is really this like emotional reset button. So to give you a scenario, I was like interviewing one of the top producers over at this life insurance company. Her name is Jasmine, and I was actually speaking with her at coaching. And then she was telling her story of like how she started out at roadshow selling, right? Being young, being green, and being a younger, she set a goal to serve. Like, she didn't want to sell to people who like same age or even NS boys. That's the usually easy target, right? She wanted to serve people that are challenging the 40s and 50s, a bit more well-heeled one, wear better. First few weeks, right, she was totally rejections. And she told me like she would just go to the toilet and give herself like 5 minutes to cry. After the 5 minutes, you cry her heart out, right? After 5 minutes, touch up, makeup, out, go. Right? So again, what I learned from all these top producers is, if they know that the pain and the pain as well as the downswing is inevitable, right? They don't let it dwell too long. Right? Because you don't dwell also, right? If you just like block it out, you're going to be unhealthy emotionally. So they let themselves cry, they let themselves, like kabu, they'll say all the things they need to say, but they give their time frame. Right? So 5 minutes, maybe you sound like a bit harsh. Do it your way, you can do it like half a day, 3 hours. But the key thing here is you know yourself. So when they are emotionally reset, they are able to zero themselves. Right? So that's one. I think I'll just give two more. Two is they are always sort of trying to be a nexus of value. So like, for example, the best life insurance consultants, which I spend a lot of time there, they're not just selling life insurance consultants, right? They know, like, for example, confinement nanny. So like, for example, this top consultant is that a lot of the clients who cannot conceive, she knows this magical lady, like, who do twina, and it just touch the babies, the stomach of the pregnant women. Non-pregnant women can become pregnant women. And then it was like, she knows taxation, international taxation. She reads books, So I think that whole spirit of like being a nexus of value, such that, when people come to you, they don't just get you in your niche, but you are able to be a connector, a knowledge base, a pod of some sorts. So they take pride in continual improvement, to go for courses, go for programs, and they're always learning. And I think the third thing would be, insofar as they are highly successful, right, they're very humble and they have a lot of gratitude. So like, again, this is the strange thing I noticed in Singapore as well. If I have like served and interacted with the ultra high net worth people who are like 7, 8, 9 figures, right? Very, very humble. But it's the people who are the middle class who like cannot seem to break through are those very, very cocky kind. So I don't know if that's a fair enough observation, but those who've already been there, they already escaped the ego conversation. They know that what's the point of like trying to strut or flex, right? They are at that level precisely because they're able to transcend the ego conversation. But it's the pre-nascent that marginally or moderately successful that with success they let the success get into the head. Right, so I see this in the kind, whether it's clients, coaches, mentees, mentors that I've observed. The more successful they are, their cup is always empty. right? But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they learn indiscriminately or they spend their time indiscriminately. But if they find trust and resonance in you, right, they are willing to empty the cup and be with you and listen from you and learn
Yeah.
from you.
So so Ben, so I think one thing that I
Yeah.
heard, right, for over the past 40 minutes or so, right, about some of the biggest insights, right, in terms of your own personal story and also some of your coaches as well, right, is this whole concept of grounding, right? So could you just share a little bit about like for yourself, right? Do you have any grounding routines, meditation exercises, mindfulness, right, that could help? Or even if you know people that might be struggling, right, what would be like some advice you provide them in terms of how they can ground themselves to ensure that they are not too caught up, right, with the ego game or getting too frustrated with that regard?
Yeah, so I think in terms of like again the context of grounding yourself, the reason why we ground ourselves is sometimes when we fly too high, we may just crash and burn, and then our whole, like for example soul or body will just be floating around, right? So
Yep,
I think
yep.
for me it's like being grounded serves me multiple purposes, but
Mm,
a few actionables that I would highly
mm,
always suggest would be uh, one, I have a mastermind group of like speakers, trainers, and
oh,
coaches who are more successful than me, right?
mm,
And insofar, I think I've been there, done that, done a few kind of things in my career. I never want to be again like again. There's merit in terms of being the successful one where you can give back, right? So you have that kind
mm,
of like function and mechanisms.
yep,
But you should also have certain like sort of like accountability people or groups
mm,
whereby they are more successful than you, then they can call your bullshit, right?
more,
So I think that's one thing that I oftentimes would literally empower them, and I'll go to my mentors and say, hey, if you ever spot me saying, doing anything that's out of the line, please use whatever words. They can be flowery, it can be in Hokkien or whatever it is. You can literally shake me or slap me awake. Please do
wow,
that for me, right?
mm,
So I think sometimes in Asia, at least in the part of Asia, right, we care so much for a friend, and I think sometimes I do that as well. But
yeah,
again, if the person is not emotionally open to receive, sometimes it may
it's a bit
damage
difficult.
relationships. So I
Yeah,
go in so far to really tell that to my mentors and close friends and even my wife, that
mm,
if I sometimes am on this like a roller coaster and I'm la la land going nowhere,
yeah,
please call me out on my bullshit, and I
wow,
empower you that, and please do not feel bad because I know you care enough for me, and hence I want
mm,
you to do that for me, right? So that's one.
mm,
I think the second part of
wow,
grounding yourself is also the whole conversation which you alluded to, which is self-care. And
mm,
I think again the whole premise is if you want to serve people, you cannot serve people when you're always running on empty, right?
mm,
So for me, being an introvert, I need to take my time out as well. So like for
yeah,
example, during spades or moments about like all about speaking training, like I just
yeah,
calculated I done like 39 virtual presentations, excluding the
wow,
client ones
yeah,
yesterday. And then there are times whereby I just need some time out, right? So
yeah,
grounding yourself is ask yourself like what grounds you, what
mm,
gets you to not be that achiever while achieving is important, what grounds
mm,
you to be that person you're comfortable with,
wow,
right?
mm,
Is it a walk in the park? Is it reading a book? Is it like cooking your favorite dish or
mm,
cuisine? Like everyone has their own recluse and takeaways
mm,
as well as the inner sanctuary, right?
yeah,
And the third thing that I probably will do is also like enrich yourself with like certain new strategies, right? I know
mm,
like there's this whole like ice bath kind of like trend that's
yeah,
going on. People soak in the ice bath. Great. Like for me,
yeah,
I do like deep breathing exercise from Wim Hof.
mm,
That's one. And I think second is like recently I also picked up like this 432 hertz music,
mm,
but it's apparently again I haven't done my science, so don't
yeah,
call me out on that. I
yeah,
words up, heads up. That
yeah,
apparently it helps you to put yourself into a meditative, a relaxed state,
mm,
and it seems to be working out for me, right? So enrich yourself and by also learning from other people and see what kind of sort of strategies work. I like to think all of us are like baking our own cake
mm,
in our whole lifetime, right? And
yeah,
and at the end of the day, you want to bake a cake that is masterpiece, that's representative of
mm,
ourselves, but you also want to ask yourself, what goes into this whole recipe. So from the
yeah,
recipe point of view, you're always going to be taking inspiration. Some of things that people say, try it. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, take it out, right?
yeah,
But over time, let's not be comfortable with just like how we are, who we are, but
yeah,
you have to have that margin of experimentation. And that's how I like to
oh,
live my life. Sometimes I'll try to do one. I used to do this, like I used to
mm,
like meet one new person that I would usually not interact with one person on a monthly basis, and that totally
wow,
opened my mind and the social experiment. So I met
yeah,
like for example Irish person, a Russian
mm,
girl. I like for example just to meet a quota, I'll go into a shopping mall and just approach someone, and
wow,
and you can realize sometimes this kind of relationships are amazing.
yeah,
Some of them I'm still keeping in contact with, by the way.
yeah.
So like this whole part of grounding. doing something that's not your hardcore work to just like, again, reset yourself. Again, maybe that's the emotional resetting, which I shared about, like in top producers, right? They have to reset. So sometimes
constantly.
it's only in the reset that you can go for the higher peaks. So it's contrary to popular belief, right? Our life is not like all the way shown up, right? On a day-to-day basis, you still need to go down. You still need to recover. You need to rest. And I think that's the whole, like, again, the long game and as well as the day-to-day game that people do not appreciate enough sometimes.
Yeah, man, it's like a stock market, right? You can't expect to go one direction, right? There's ups and downs.
I mean, we wish, but we're not machines, you see, right? We are all like people with flesh and blood, right? So I think, again, in everything, you need to know like what feeds your soul and the kind of person you are and how you are being wired.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I think yes, you also talked about self-care, right? I think something that you have your own alone time, don't like not like 100% hustle all the time because you get burned out, right? I think I love the fact that you actually constantly proactively ask for feedback. Even though yes, you know that they can take it, but you know that a lot of people sometimes they might be a bit too shy or embarrassed to say for fear of hurting a feeling, but you preempt them and you get it. I absolutely love it because feedback I think is one of the most powerful things that actually keep you improving on a much regular level, right? So I think I can move on to my last final question, right? Something I think just a little challenge I always ask my guests. Like, so for example, right now, right, like Benjamin, right now, like today, right, you had to start all over from scratch, right? That means you lost your networks, your credibility, right, your branding, right, even the CSP, right? So and you actually brought into, let's say, a city, right? There's still Wi-Fi, right? There's still like the basic needs that's being met. So what will you do, right, in the first 30 days, right, to actually not only bounce back to where you are right now, right, actually go beyond? So what are some of the actionable steps you take in the first 30 days, right, to make sure that you actually get back to where you are right now and also beyond what you are doing at the moment? I think that would be a cool, hopefully inspiration, right, to some audience that could really learn from the insights there.
Yeah. So while I also swear to the whole longevity thing, getting the basics and fundamentals, right, I also realized that over time, I mean, the answer to your question is going to be varying across your guest to guest, right, depending on what kind of work they do and what kind of professional business they're in. Absolutely. I think if I were to be like stranded into a new place, zero everything, right, is you can't run away. But the great thing about in a speaking business is a very low OPEX and CAPEX business. You do not need to buy a machine to give a speech. Right, the machine is your microphone, which usually a client will give, right? Or you do not have like heavy operating and ongoing expense as well, right? So for me, I think there's already just the 4 components: create, market, sell, speak, right? So one is to create, right? So I think public speaking is a creative process. So you got to let that whole, like, for example, whether the stories to tell, whether things to flow, the themes to come about, and knowing the audience that you want to serve, that the creation piece. We are all creative in different aspects. We are all creative in different kind of manifestations as well. But the whole speaking part is like, first, create something that you're proud of, that you believe you can serve others. Second, I think learn to market it. So marketing your speech is really, again, bringing your message out to the market space and letting people know that you exist and you can serve them and you have something to offer them. I think the sell, I look at this as tabletop. When you finally meet people whom you marketed and they're willing to give you time, then that's where you're able to, like, set value to value expectations and say why my stuff or my content or my 1 hour is worth X dollars in your currency, right? And then last part is to speak, right? Really master and ace that. So I think, again, like, it's not that confusing as well, right? So convoluted as we can be, like speakers this day, we talk about CRM, Kajabi versus Teachable versus Thinkific versus, like, for example, landing pages, autoresponders, drip mail marketing, blah blah blah. But again, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are all the tools of the market, right? But strip it all out, from the very, very the key functions: create, market, sell, speak. And then once you do that, you just get better, and deepen it. And that's where you're going to get thrive and pick yourself up again. It's not too, again, the speaking business is not a high-tech business, right? We're not like sort of like finding a cure or a vaccine for COVID-19, right? It doesn't need like that the many kind of permutations. You just need to do the work, find the value, get paying customers, speak, get better, and then there's a virtuous circle that get you upwards to where you need to get.
Wow, absolutely love it. So thanks so much, Benjamin. I think it's a lot of grounding, a lot of the key foundations, right? I think people got to understand they actually want to enter the space, right? And you actually apply to multiple industries or areas as well, right? So so with that, thanks, Benjamin. I think I loved the interview. I think there's so many like nuggets of insights, your stories, right, that really inspire and also give some actionable tips to the audience out there. So as the last, like, how can my audience find you, right? And just any final words, message you have for the audience out there?
Okay, so how you can find me is via my first and last name, Benjamin, and last name is spelled with Loh, L-O-H. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or
Yep.
even WeChat. TikTok, not that heavy yet, but to start
Not
on
yet.
2021. Yeah, my plan is like I'm gonna have a baby boy, so maybe I'm gonna explore some like baby boy and first time dad kind of content just for fun of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final last words? If I could just like take the privilege of time to share that in the final 1 minute story, right?
Mm,
So I was in India when I was in my volunteering days, and I met this
mm.
friend from Rwanda. He was a very, very crazy guy. He was very quirky, and that's the whole purpose, right? You don't hang out with people who are like you. He was
Just
very
like, yeah.
quirky, and then we started to have like a drinks at the bar, and then he and me was like public speaking aficionados, right? Or passionate
Mm.
about public speaking. And then he said like, Ben, why do you like public speaking? And then I said, no, it's my platform to serve. And then I asked him obviously the question in return. And he said like, no, Ben, for me, public speaking is a duty. Right. And I said, well, wow, like what national service duty kind of like sounds so heavy, right? And I hadn't seen it that way, to be honest, until I met him at 18 years old. He said, like, Ben,
Oh.
when you're giving a speech for 10 minutes to 50 people, you're not just giving a 10-minute speech, right? You're taking up 500 minutes of the world's time. And that totally
Wow.
reframed me, right? Because like, people think 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, you go out there, say your stuff, right? But if you take the time that you are speaking, active time,
Yeah.
and multiply it with the number of like live warm audience who invested their time, which they otherwise will not ever get back in return, and they could otherwise spend it with their loved ones and whatsoever,
Yeah.
right? They give you 500 minutes of world's time, right? You start to appreciate the totality of the work that you do. So to take it like in retrospect, last year when I was speaking for 1 hour, 60 minutes, times 6,000 audience, right?
Oh.
I multiplied that and then I realized, shit,
Oh.
taking a lot of the world's time just with me, right? You start to again like fill yourself up with almost like a obligation or duty to realize that you're not just there to speak. You're
Yeah.
there to make a difference and impact. And while it's almost like the rehash of the same message, right? But I think the way that my friend from Rwanda shared with me totally made me appreciate like the job of speakers is not just to fill time, right? It's
Yep.
we are supposed to make meaning out of time and make a meaning out of time that is an experience that they otherwise will not get from reading books, from Google. Otherwise, what's the value of you, right? Your time, that 1 hour, is something that emits a value and experience that transcends whatever they could otherwise get. If you cannot do that, then don't speak. So that's what I tell myself as well. Like if I'm going to just like copy and paste Google stuff, then I don't speak. I tell my clients, ask the clients to find Google. But if I am going to speak, I'm going to treasure the world's time and design an experience that can really serve that, such that they will be anchored, they'll be grounded, and they'll be able to serve the people that they are supposed to serve in a much better way.
Wow, right. That's a powerful message. I think it's really about the kind of contribution impact it make to the world, right? So thank you so much for sharing your story. Yeah. So with that, right, I think thanks again, right, Ben, for the interview, right, and for the audience out there, right. We'll see you for the next edition of Master Mentors. Comment down below what are some of your biggest takeaways, right, and we'll be sure to share this over and over again for people with you who will benefit. All right. So with that, see you everyone, and thanks again, Ben. Right. See you.
Right. Thanks, Mark.